Hello. As a doctor, I see a lot of health anxiety, and weirdly in younger people more than older people. So, as I'm going through my existential crisis podcast series at the moment, I noticed that there was one existential crisis that I was yet to cover, and that is related to physical health, illness, death, etc. And I thought, what better to cover in that one than health anxiety with a kind of relation to existential crises, because I think they're so linked, they just are. And I think although health anxieties might be more commonly verbalised, I think there's always an underlying existential crisis in the background. So today I'm going to be answering, what is health anxiety? How does it present? What are some kind of unusual symptoms that I've seen? And how is it linked to an existential crisis? And finally, how to manage them? Because that's what you all came here for, isn't it? Hi Dawn, a what? Hi, my name's Dawn. I don't know what happened there. I'm a doctor and I talk about all human life problems, mental afflictions, etc. And we get over them together. I'd just like to expose the elephant in the room here. If you're watching, you may notice how incredibly sweaty I look. Number one, it's extremely hot. I don't know what's going on. Number two, I need a shower while I'm sweating. And also, I can't open the window when I'm podcasting because we live on quite a busy road. And it will just make so much noise that, you won't be able to cope with it. So today we're sweating. I've got the light on and we're sweating. Okay, I just wanted to cover that one. I don't have something wrong with me that I know of. I'm just really shiny. So I've had some experience with health anxiety. Mine was never to a point where I needed to get help for it though. I was always able to get over it, I suppose, and manage it myself. But I've also had some physical symptoms in relation to anxiety. I wouldn't really call that necessarily health anxiety, but I think those symptoms can then lead on to health anxiety. And I have had a recent breast scare, and I did go and get my boobie checked out, which I thoroughly recommend for all of you guys that have boobs. And I'm going to talk about my boobies, my boob lump scare. So, I also forgot, I do have quite an issue with death existential crises. I think about it probably a bit too much. So let's get into those. Right. So my breast lump, I think it's still there and it's still really sore. Oh, anyway, I had it for a while and I thought, it's okay. It's probably just boob tissue. And, it would get a bit worse when period came around, etc. By the way, I'd like to point out that I also got bitten by a horsefly, so my leg has a massive bite on it. So that's why I'm scratching. I know that I shouldn't, but it feels really good. And as a result, I went to the GP after going to see them about my sinuses and thinking, no, come on, Dawn, you need to talk about your boobies, your boob lump. So I mentioned it in the appointment and she was like, yeah, we should probably go get that checked out. There's a lump there. And I was like, fuck. I didn't expect you to be like, yeah, we'll get that investigated. I expected you to be like, nah, it's all right. It's just normal boobie. And then when you were like, the GP, when the GP was like, yeah, let's go get that checked out, I was like, well, I was not expecting that. Being a doctor myself, I was kind of like, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And so to hear somebody say, yeah, let's get it checked out, whether they thought anything was wrong with it or not, and I know that doctors definitely hold stuff back, being one myself, you don't want to overly worry people unnecessarily. So I was like, oh, fuck, so I'm dying. Anyway, at that point, the worst goes through your head, doesn't it? You're like, well, especially being a doctor, you're like, and we'll get onto that in a minute, where doctor and health anxiety meet, it's a very fun place. Because when you're a doctor, you see what breast lumps can lead to. And then you see the worst of it, of course. You see a big spectrum, but in hospital you see the worst of it. And you see people getting massive breast reconstructions and getting malignant, metastases, and then, having brain mets and lung mets, are the most common areas for breast cancer to go. And so I was like, literally, my mind went to dark places, okay? I was like, I'm dying, let's start writing my will. What will the pups do? My dogs, what will the pups do without their mummy? Who will they go to? My boyfriend's going to be on his own. Have I said everything I needed to say? Have I done everything I needed to do? Anyway, that's where my mind went. But then I went and got it checked out and they were like, it's fine. And I was like, oh. So I worried about that for nothing. Thankfully, they got me in within a few days. So it was only like a few days of worrying. But I can see where the spiraling comes from, all right? And it's definitely worse. There's something called medical student syndrome. When you're a medical student, you're learning about all these horrible diseases, which most of them you don't even see because they're so rare. But you learn about all these horrible diseases and then you start thinking, my God, I have all of these. And you don't because they're really rare. And most of the time, nobody sees them. Like, they are one in, 500,000 or whatever. And I think because we see the worst of the worst and we see people like dying and go from being fine to not being fine very quickly and then dying very suddenly. As a doctor, you definitely question life and death and you think, God, it could happen at any moment. I could literally die. I could get cancer. I could have cancer right now. And so I don't want this to be a scary episode, by the way. I realise that it is sounding a little bit scary, but I have ways of coping with that. I'm not curled up in a ball crying in the corner. I have to get on with my job and there are ways of coping with it. So if I manage it, then you can too. All right. So those were my recent health scares. Not mega, but a little bit. And also I'm going to tell you about my physical anxiety symptoms because I do get them. I think that anxiety is so interesting because it causes so many symptoms and everyone's like, no, I've really got this problem, and you're like, yeah, you do, but it could definitely be linked to anxiety or your mental health. And I think a lot of people think that doctors are fobbing them off, and maybe that we just need better training on how to do that. How to manage people, who are presenting with those symptoms. And I think some of that is a deficit of time. When you have more time, you're a lot more patient with things, you have more time to explain things, you have more time to go through things with people, and people like your time, people like being listened to, but that is the sad state of affairs at the moment. We'd never go home if we fully listened to everybody, so, or gave everybody the time that, they need, that all they want. It's the sad case of healthcare generally. I think it's not just in the UK, but there we go. So I think the common symptoms are chest pain, very common in anxiety. A lot of people are very worried about their hearts. Palpitations, also a very common one, because it's a very palpable feeling, you feel your heart jumping out of your chest and you're like, oh God, what is that? And if it happens a lot, and it's ironic because the more anxious you are, the more it happens because of adrenaline and mainly adrenaline and stress hormones, they lead to faster heart rate, and therefore you might get more ectopics. You might feel your heart rate more. Ectopics are I just realised I just said that without any context. Ectopics are beats that are, it feels like your heart's jumping out your chest, and they are generally benign as long as they're not happening too frequently. But I'm saying lots of medical words. Benign meaning fine, not a problem, not going to kill you. But they are quite worrisome because they do feel like your heart's about to stop. But it's not. Good times. So the faster your heart goes, the more likelihood you have of getting, palpitations, which is the feeling like you can feel your heart. Most of the time, most of us can't feel our heart. And my anxiety got severely bad at the end of last year, to the point where I had a lot of physical symptoms. I am a kind of hidden anxiety person. My anxiety doesn't show hugely well. I'm not bouncing off the walls crying. I'm like, I get like the freeze response out of the fight, flight or freeze. I'm not like a fight or a flight, I'm a freeze. I'm like a ugh. So I get something called over breathing, which is where you're so tight that you don't breathe deeply enough, and then you overcompensate by breathing in a massive breath to kind of compensate for the fact that you've not been breathing deeply enough because you're so tense. As a result, I would always get a really sore throat. Now, what also happened was I got really bad reflux, which is where you get like a burning pain going up and then it goes to the back of your throat. And I know a lot of people get tummy pain as well. And I don't think it's like hugely known why, but I think my best bet is that I think all of your nervous system is fucking amazing, but it's all connected, right? So if you're anxious and you've got all of those stress hormones and you've got all of those fight or flight adrenaline going around, then things are going to constrict. And that also means things like your internal abdominal muscles are going to be infected as well, because they're not under control by like our conscious brain. So, there's a thing where when you start running or whatever, you get constriction of the vessels around your tummy so that blood can go to your muscles. Now, is something like that happening? Maybe. I don't know that we've ever done severe investigations into that, but it sounds plausible, doesn't it? So that's my theory. I'm not putting any medical grounding on that whatsoever. You can go and have a look as to why, but I don't think it's like necessarily commonly known. But I think a lot of it, the thoughts are that a lot of it is muscle related, constriction of muscle, chest pain as well. We've got lots of muscles in between our ribs to lift them up. And these can hurt, they can spasm, and that can cause twinges and chest pains. And that is another thought as well as to where the chest pain from anxiety comes from. God, I've got a spot there, how gross. So it's gross not because it's a spot, but because I think it's because I'm so sweaty. I don't know, but I've got one here too on my cheek. So great. Okay. I don't want people to think that pain related to anxiety is not real. It is. The issue is, I don't deny that it's real. I am a firm believer that pain is real. Whether we have a way to manage the pain and to get rid of the pain and to treat the pain is another question. And I think that's where doctors fall a little bit short, because we're like, well, we don't have, there's no operation, there's nothing that I can like take out, there's no infection that I can treat. And we don't want to give people things like painkillers that are really addictive and have loads of side effects. And we don't want to give people like anxiolytics, so anxiety medication, or muscle relaxants, because again, they're very addictive and people want the short-term relief, but also it's hard because it's like, when does that stop? And that's when people can get addicted to these medications. What I'm talking about here is things like codeine, tramadol, morphine, and then other things like diazepam, lorazepam, midazolam, those ones which you might have heard of or might not. They also probably have brand names, of which I do not know the name because we don't work in brand names as doctors. So as a doctor, I regularly question life, because I see birth, I see death, and I think also I'm quite an overthinker. I'm also an existential person, so the lot of them combined is not a good mix. I personally don't think I've ever had health anxiety, as in like to a point where I've had to seek medical help. Like I said, I can usually sort of sort myself out. In terms of, that's not me ignoring the problem as such, that's just me saying it's never gotten to a debilitating point. So, but I have seen people a lot of people, sadly, who it is very debilitating for. And I try to think, like, is how I'm treating them like a good way? I don't think there's necessarily much training. You know, we get a lot of medical training, how to do CPR and how to fix somebody after a heart attack, and what medications to give them and what pain relief to give them. And we don't get a lot of training on how to manage people's mental health around, especially health anxiety, because after COVID, oh boy, did health anxiety get worse. I think a lot of people's anxiety got worse. I think a lot of people's mental health issues got worse after COVID, and I still see people wearing masks, which really surprises me. A lot of people are like, no, I'm fucking done, like, go away. And that was me. I was always on that end of the spectrum, like, no, I do not want to wear a mask, please. I was like ready to get rid of that shit as soon as possible, because, I mean, for instance, I'm sitting here, I'm pouring with sweat. Now, if I had a mask on, even worse. Now, it is weird though, because you go into hospital and you're like, oh, everybody can see my face now. I have to behave. I can't yawn. That's probably my big one. But that's not because you're boring me, that's because I don't sleep very well sometimes. And that's a sad time for me. I think what really freaks me out as a doctor is seeing dead bodies. That really gets me like, oh shit, like life is going to end one day. And I find it very perplexing for me being like, that body, because when it's just a body, like they are so lifeless that you think, oh, there was a person in there, and you could say, well, the person is still in there, but they're not, in my head. So it's very perplexing. And I do think being a doctor does affect like how I behave in terms of my health. I want to be healthier, I want to look after myself, I want to exercise. I don't want to get any fatter because I won't fit in my clothes, for one, and that would be expensive, and also because I just don't want to get diabetes. It's not good. But like I said, I think my level of anxiety about health is not necessarily so bad, but I do think my anxiety related to death, related to health, especially as I'm like reaching 30, I'm like, oh god, now's probably, am I going to start getting cancer? Or like, you know, I don't know, that scares me. I don't want cancer, but there we go. Okay, now I've scared you all. I hope I haven't. I didn't mean for that to be scary. It's quite late, I'm a bit sleep deprived, and I'm sweating. So I'm a bit somewhat delirious. I just woke up from a nap. Probably a bad idea. Look, my sleeping pattern is not okay. Alright, I agree. So let's get on. I think we didn't cover what health anxiety actually looks like. Now, people can be worried about their health. I think that's perfectly normal. I think the time when it becomes a problematic disease is when it starts to impact your daily life. It stops you from doing things. It consumes your thoughts. It becomes a constant worry, and it changes the way you behave, and not in a good way. Like, not like, oh, I'm gonna, walk an extra mile every day just to be healthier. No, it's like, I need to exercise 5 hours a day or I'm gonna die and be really unhealthy, and I need to make sure I run and do 50 million sit-ups and eat only foods that are healthy and things like that. So there is a boundary, and there are people that are very into health and fitness but don't have health anxiety. But I think it's how much of what's going on is in your head in terms of the thoughts are affecting the way you're living your life. And I think you can have health anxiety as well without having any physical symptoms whatsoever. You can just be like me a little bit, just worried about like, oh god, death is imminent, not imminent. Death is definite. That's what I was looking for. Death is oh my god, what's wrong with me? Death is definite. Try and say that quickly. Death is definite. Death is definite. Okay, maybe don't. I don't know if I'm just worrying people with this, but I hope you're having a good time anyway. So we are going to get on to how to manage it. All right, I just wanted to cover that one quickly. How to manage health anxiety and existential crises surrounding it. I think you have to think, what is causing the anxiety? Because sometimes it's a physical symptom. I've seen a lot of people have abdominal pain, chest pain, but abdominal pain is a particularly common one that people get very caught up in and concerned about. And the abdomen is a horrible place to have pain because it's so visceral, it's so gut-wrenching, and it really isn't very nice. And, there's lots of things in there that don't want to be upset. So having abdominal pain can be quite debilitating for people. And because there's so many organs in there, and actually the abdomen is very non-specific with its pain, it's often just sort of a little bit vague. It can be quite hard to really pinpoint what's going on, and that can cause even more anxiety for people because people want a diagnosis, because actually having something to label what is going on is quite mentally settling for people. And I think, figuring out what is actually causing your health anxiety. Are you grieving the loss of a loved one who died suddenly and that's affecting you? In which case you might need to go and get some, grief, deal with the grief over that and then have some trauma counselling. I'm just throwing suggestions out there. I don't know you need to figure that one out for yourself, but here are some suggestions. I think there are definitely places like the pain clinic who are super helpful and knowledgeable about dealing with chronic pain and physical symptoms. And there's also clinics now called what are they called? Functional, I don't know, they're called different things in different places, but functional pain clinics, functional symptom clinic. Basically, when somebody has a symptom that isn't related to a physical problem and they need help managing that. Now, a lot of people get very offended, and it's hard because as a doctor on the other side, because you want to help them, but it feels really offensive to say, and for the people receiving it, it feels offensive to them for us to be like, there's nothing physically that we can fix. And people then think, well, you're just saying I'm crazy then. And it's like, no, I wish there was a different way to say it, a way that I knew to say it, but it's really hard. And like I said before, I always say the pain's there. We just haven't got anything that we can, like a medical cause that we can fix as such. I'm not denying that you can feel the pain. I'm not denying any of your symptoms because they are real to you. That sounds patronising because they are real, especially to you because you have to deal with them. It's amazing what intonation does to a sentence, isn't it? And I don't ever want to discount those symptoms. I have this over under breathing issue, and for me, I know it's anxiety related because I know I can feel when I get anxious and tense, and I noticed it particularly over COVID. I got really bad, but that symptom is real to me. Do I have an obstructive respiratory disorder? No, I don't. Or restrictive respiratory disorder? No, I don't. And if you did tests on me, they would be normal, but the symptoms are still there, and I know that they're there and I can feel them. So find out where the anxiety is coming from. Is it from a physical symptom? Is it from an external circumstance, such as somebody getting ill? Is it from a health scare of your own? Or a new diagnosis as well? And getting to the core of that issue is probably going to be pertinent to solving your problem. Now, if it is a physical symptom, then we get on to the reality of that physical symptom. And there is a time and a place to get things checked out. Now, I can't give you medical advice or whatever, and I don't actually know what your symptoms are or when you're having them or whatever. But here's some just general things. I would say get your symptoms checked out and recognise what patterns within that. You might want to keep a diary. You might want to journal it. There are apps that you can track all your symptoms on. So I don't know what they're called. You'd be able to just Google that and find out. But it can help you link, how am I feeling today and what symptoms do I have? And that can be a really nice way of finding a causative link between them. I would say always, for a first instance of any new symptom, I would go and get it checked out because it's always a good idea, And within reason, use your common sense. But if you're getting a chest pain that you've never had before, go and get that checked out, obviously. Or an abdominal pain that you've never had before and it's new. But if you notice that, you're having some stress at work and your tummy feels a little bit painful, and then when you're distracted and doing other things and you're not at work, the tummy pain goes away, well, you could probably say that's quite reassuring. And if you notice the cause and effect of it, then you're not thinking, oh my god, I've got tummy pain again. You can think, okay, I've got tummy pain, I'm in a stressful situation, that's probably what's causing it, let's see what happens. Obviously, if it gets worse and worse, or more symptoms come, or it changes, then that might be a different story. But I think that's a good kind of thing to have in your head. So for me, a big trigger was like going into work for my breathing issue, and also trying to do really busy ward rounds. It would make me super anxious because I just would feel very overwhelmed by it all. And as a result, I'd get really tense. And also, I would often have too much caffeine in the morning. So once I reduced my caffeine, that's another good tip, reducing exacerbating factors to whatever's causing your symptoms. So yes, reducing your anxiety, but also things like is alcohol giving you tummy pain, or caffeine giving you a headache, or things like that. Just trying to reduce whatever's causing the problematic symptom. So now is when we get into the kind of health anxiety, because I think with health anxiety you can get that symptom checked out and then you just don't quite believe the doctor. You think, well, they haven't done every test out there, or maybe it's different this time, or maybe they missed something, and that is a very common problem, and it's really hard to give real, nitty-gritty advice on this one because it's a bit bespoke. Always remember, though, that you can get a second opinion, but if you do that, you need to then think, okay, I've now had 2 doctors' opinions, they've looked at all the tests, they've done tests, and they're all fine. That is reassuring. And at that point, once you've got all those things checked out, it's now time to think, okay, if the tests are normal, then what else is there in my life that could be related to this? And it might be worth exploring your mental health related to that. And also the kind of obsessive thoughts and behaviours around, there's definitely something wrong with me. I get it though. I always think it's quite, number one, I think it's quite reassuring that tests are normal, but number 2, you're always going to be like, well, some people are, not everybody. Some people are like, oh cool, you did a blood test and I'm fine. But some people, especially with health anxiety, are like, well, you did 1 test or 2 tests, but you've got more. Why haven't you done all of them? And then I think if the symptoms carry on or get worse, then you could go on to get more tests. But the issue is, once you've had the highest level of test, you can't just keep having it, because as in, they've got risks and issues associated with them. So that is the time that you have to think, okay, no, there's something I need to work on myself here. And having more and more tests, getting more and more reassurance it's not doing anything. And that is a time when you need to think deeply within yourself. That's such a a gross phrase, but kind of true. And think, well, maybe I need to go and get some CBT. Maybe I need to get some counselling. Maybe it's time to get myself on the list for that. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because our mental health and our physical health are so linked, okay? You can have mental health problems without physical health problems, and vice versa, or you can have them together. In fact, very common, because a lot of people do have mental health problems, and a lot of people get having a physical health problem is, especially pain that no one can diagnose, is stressful and upsetting and distressing. So they are very linked, and it would be great if we could have a test where we could really show that. But at the moment it's just, there's a lot of theory, and so we have to come up with ways to, in ourselves, manage that. I think one thing with symptoms is if a pain or an issue is distractible, as in, I'm sitting thinking about it, it's worse. If I go out and meet friends and have a good time, is the problem still there? And then when I go home, does it come back? Is it distractible? So if you're if you're having a heart attack, you're not going to be able to go to the pub and meet your friends, probably, and be able to forget about it, because it's still there, But if something is distractible, well, you can say, okay, well, that's reassuring, I would say. I think a lot of the issue then comes down to medications. And the thing with health anxiety and, well, there's often things like depression and anxiety, obviously, concomitant with health anxiety itself. It might be worth getting checked out for those problems as well, so that you can get those treated, because once you sort of start managing those two, if you have them, then things with health anxiety might start settling down. I think one of the biggest treatments for health anxiety is CBT, counselling, and having a professional talk through it with you. But you can do things at home. I think journaling is really helpful. Like I said, not just keeping a symptom diary, but a diary of, how much it's affecting you and how mentally you're dealing with it. And it's kind of a bit like a counselling session, but it's free. So who doesn't love free things? And like I said about medications, they unfortunately are not the cure, especially pain medications, with things that aren't, where there isn't a physical medical cause, if you see what I mean. The medications often have really, addictive qualities, negative side effects, and you have to keep increasing the dose more and more and more. And then you start getting side effects as a result of those, which make other things worse, like, you're more drowsy, so you struggle to go to work, and then you don't go to work, so your anxiety gets worse, and then you have to have more medications. And it just becomes, there are some points where you might have anxiety and depression, you need to go on antidepressants. But I think sometimes the cycle of medication can get a little bit out of control when the mental affliction that we have is just getting worse and worse and worse. Why isn't medication helping? Well, I need to go on a higher dose, and then, well, once you've reached the higher dose, then where do you go? So I think it's better to nip that in the bud sooner rather than later, and find sort of better coping mechanisms to deal with health anxiety, rather than just going on to medications and dealing with it in that kind of way. The other thing that people sometimes do is start using recreational drugs or things like alcohol to try and deal with the symptoms. I mean, it goes without saying that those things are only going to make those things worse. Alcohol has its own negative side effects, as well as recreational drugs. I think the sooner you start managing your health anxiety and issues surrounding that, the easier it is going to be to overcome it. And don't ever think that you can't get rid of it. I've seen people, it's, it might always be there, and it's very slightly a 1 out of 10 in the background. But if you can get away from the 10 out of 10, it's occupying all of my thoughts, all of my life, I can't leave the house mindset, then a 1 out of 10 is pretty good. It's manageable, and if you can catch it at a 3 out of 10 rather than it getting to 10 out of 10, then it's much easier to bring it to a manageable 1 out of 10. I think the thought of, oh my god, I'm never going to get over it, can be quite overwhelming. But I don't think that's true, because I know people who have gotten over it and they live very fine lives. Does it occasionally peek into their consciousness? Yes, it does. But it doesn't mean that it stops them from doing things. It just means that they've got the ability after, having counselling and CBT and things like that to go, okay, it's just your anxiety getting out of hand. The symptoms have not changed. There is a clear link with my situation and my emotional state at the moment and the stress that I'm under. If I try and deal with the stress and have better coping mechanisms for that, then hopefully the physical symptoms will go away and I will stop worrying about them, essentially. Now, I guess the last question on my lips mainly, I was going to say on everybody's lips, but mine, is what do we do about dealing with a health-related existential crisis? The feeling that, we're always going to die. Well, I think That's a very hard one, okay? I struggle with it, and I think everybody does in a way, and I think some people are better at ignoring it, and ignorance is bliss, and pushing it to the side and thinking, no, I'm not going to think about that because it's inevitable. There's nothing I can do about it. There's no point trying to escape it, so why even give it the time of day? And that has some merit, but for some people, actually just squashing it down will only rear its ugly head up more viciously later down the line. So I feel like that might be the case for me. So for people like that, I think ways to get over it, okay? Finding your purpose in life. If you feel like you've lived a fulfilling, happy life where you contributed well to the world and you did things that you wanted to do and you feel like you live life to the fullest, well, I don't think you can ever regret that. Say yes to things more. Do things out your comfort zone. Go out and do things that you would never usually do. Live your life. Like, life is not just about working. And I know this sounds really fucking cringy. Like, YOLO, go and live your life. But that's kind of the way I think about it. You know, you can sit around and go, well, I'll just go 9 to 5 to work and I'll come home and then I'll cook food and I'll go to sleep and I'll do it again. And then on the weekend, I'll go and have a cheese board. And that's my life. And I'm not saying cheese boards aren't fun. Okay, I'm just saying, is that really truly the best you can do? Like, what about, you know, going to the Bahamas? I know that's currently not in my money repertoire, but going out and seeing places around you, and just, there are different ways to find your purpose in life. Give me un second, because I did have them up. They seem to be evading me right now. Cool. Okay, so there are different types of ways to find your purpose and get fulfillment in life. Number one, you can give things to people and volunteer, or go and help people in need, or go and help in, you know, crisis management, as in like war management, or, you know, famines or things like that. And some people get a lot of value from doing that. I'm sorry, that's not me. Like, I think maybe when I'm like 60, that'll be my vibe, but not right yet. The devoter, dedication to a cause, and you give up your kind of own identity to join a bigger group of people, and that might be like, you know, the humanitarian MSF, like Médecins Sans Frontières. As a doctor, you might go and join them and like fulfill your purpose within that group. Again, it's not for me, but I am here in some of these, okay? Creator. I am a creator. Here I am. Look at me, behold. I have a lot of happiness when I'm editing something and I'm like, that was fucking perfect. Like, I've created a masterpiece and I got a lot of my fulfillment from creating those things, and then I would often put them out to the world and people would be like, like, as in, you know, wouldn't get as many views as I thought, or the retention rate wasn't so good, you know, people weren't watching it for very long, and I based a lot of my self-worth and purpose on that, and now I've let that go. Life's a lot better. I'm like, no, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for my own creative outlet. Don't think about other people. Number 4, pleasure seeker. Like I just said, you know, traveling, adrenaline activities, going to a field and sitting and having a picnic, doing more mindful things, gardening. Just, it doesn't have to be massive, like going and climbing fucking Everest, but finding pleasure in the world around you. Number 5, there are 7, by the way, so I'm nearly done, don't worry. Achiever. You want to achieve a goal. That might be writing a book, or getting a Nobel Prize, or, I don't know, getting an IMBD certification, credit, that's the word I was looking for. Any of those and you're on your way, all right? So find a goal and achieve it. Harmonizer. This is more spiritual. As in, you think, well, I think this is why a lot of people have religions, is because it gives them a sense of greater purpose and resolves some kind of existential dread in you. And it's like this feeling that your soul will live on, and if you bring happiness to the world, then happiness will come to you, and maybe that there's like an afterlife or things like that. A lot of people find a lot of solace in that. And number 7, shaman. I don't know what that means, but it's basically to say that a lot of people want to have children, pass on their legacy and pass on their knowledge to younger generations, and that is how they get their purpose in life. I think finding a purpose is one of the best ways to overcoming an existential crisis, amongst many things. You know, sorting your life out, just generally living a better life, exercising, doing things that make you happy, journaling, living a slower, more mindful life with less addictive dopamine qualities, and having a good time, spending time with family and friends, and being happy with what you've got and being grateful. These are all things that you can that make you feel a bit better about the fact that one day you will die. And I think, interestingly, as people get older, they tend to get less worried about death, I think, or maybe they're hiding it, but that's just something I've noticed. So don't think that just because you get older, things are going to get more and more bleak. You can still live a very happy and healthy life up until you're very old. I've seen some 100-year-olds bloody prancing about on the ward, trust me. It's a mixture of good genetics and resilience and keeping themselves well and not giving up. So there are definitely ways to live a good life. I think also just talking about it, listening to podcasts like mine, finding ways to just better yourself and things around you and live a happier and healthier life are just all ways to overcoming the inevitable, existential, not inevitable. I don't know what I was gonna say, but overcoming the fear of the inevitable, death. Anyway, I think that will be it for today. It's quite late. I'm ready for, I don't know actually, shower. I'm definitely ready for a shower. Sweaty boy. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I might have been a bit triggering for some of you guys. Be nice to yourselves. Think, oh my god, I just listened to Dawn talking for, how long is it? Where's it gone? Almost an hour. Listen to Dawn talking. It's probably going to be about 45 minutes. 45 minutes of Dawn talking about death, dying, existential crises. It's a heavy topic, okay? I hope to make it somewhat light for you. I don't want to make it depressing, but I understand that I've talked about some quite heavy, deep things. So if you're struggling after this, be nice to yourselves. Go and talk to somebody. Journal. Go for a nice walk. Do something that makes you happy. You know, don't sit and mull about it and be sad. I hope it was somewhat motivating for you. If you did like it, and give it a like if you're watching on YouTube's. If you're listening on just a podcast, hi, thanks for joining. Please give me a rating if you liked it. If you didn't, then maybe don't bother. And yeah, share it with your friends. If you want any topics for me to talk about, then please let me know. But generally I talk about life's mental afflictions, the issues that we all have as humans. And soon I'm going to be talking about dissociation. I keep thinking I'm going to do this and then not doing it because it's a heavy topic, it's a hard one, it's a long one for me to talk about, but I am going to do it, I promise, because it's something I struggled with: depersonalization, derealization, and dissociation. So that will be coming up soon. I also cover some somewhat happier topics. Well, I always try to put like a somewhat positive spin on things, hence the name. But yeah, I've got lots of good things coming and they will help you, so why not join? Alright, thanks for listening guys, bye.